Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Kathy Burnett from Brain Lair Books, and I'm here tonight with Renee Watson and Paula Chase to talk about Paula's book Turning Point, but just to also talk about Black girlhood. Before we get started, Brain Lair Books is excited to host Paula and Renee, and we do have a code of conduct that we feel pertains to all of our events that we do online and in person. We're dedicated to providing a harassment-free environment for everyone, regardless of gender, gender identity, expression, age, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, or religion, or lack thereof. We do not tolerate harassment of any participants in any form. All attendees, speakers, sponsors, and volunteers at Brain Lair are required to agree with this code of conduct. We will remove you from the event, and we will ban you from the event. And we will try to make it so that you do not come to any of our events. This is a one and done kind of thing. So please make sure you're here to uplift and support our authors and the rest of the attendees at the event. Again, participants engaging in harassing behavior will be removed and banned from the current and successive events. And only Brain Lair LLC is a determinant of whether you are exhibiting harassing behavior. All right? Okay, keep that in your mind. So I'm going to have each person come on and introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. Paula, why don't you start for us, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Paula Chase. I am the co-founder of the Brown Bookshelf, and I've been writing middle grade and young adult fiction since about 2007. I am a big inclusion advocate and also advocating for more exposure for books for our young readers who are caught in the middle of traditional middle grade and traditional young adult. Happy to be here tonight.
Hi, I'm Renee Watson. I'm just so excited to be here with Paula to celebrate her new book. I write young adult and middle grade and picture books and also poetry. So I'm just excited to be here tonight to talk books and Black girlhood and whatever else comes up.
All right. I'm going to just
like whatever else comes up
for a minute and let you guys go ahead and start talking and see if I need to jump in at any time. So let's start whenever you're ready.
Well, Paula, maybe
tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, talk about the book a little bit.
So it's funny. I tend to write about like whatever. I always love writing about the same characters because I want to take them through paces. But Virginia Duncan, my editor at Green Willow, had said, "Are you going to do a ballet book?" Because she knows that my daughter is studying classical ballet. And I thought, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't, just wasn't something that was really on my mind. But then I thought about the fact that I had the girls dancing in So Done, and I wanted to explore the fact that they were growing in their dance. So Turning Point came about because I wanted to explore what Mo felt when she would get out of her regular environment, dancing at the rec, dancing at her school. But on the flip side of that, I wanted to explore what life was like for her friend Rasheeda, because Rasheeda has a very strict aunt, and sort of what that feels like when you're constantly under so many restrictions that you don't really know what's right anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to look at those two stories, and it was important that they be taking separate journeys, because in my other two books, in Doughboys and So Done, it was more the parallel journey. I mean, you saw each of them together in the same space, and I wanted to take them out of the same space this time.
Do you have is there any of you in the book, like from your childhood, were you drawing on any experience, even if it wasn't literal, like plot points, but more like the emotional impact of what your characters are going through?
Uh-oh. I'll answer while Paula comes back. So for me in the book, my daughter she took ballet, but she didn't like it and she moved to tap, but she took tap her entire life. She's 25 now. She still tap dances and she went to an intensive program. But when she was first starting, she did feel out of place. So I can see how that works. Paula is back. We're ready for you, Paula.
I am. So I heard Renee, and she was asking, was there any of me in essentially in the story? I lost a little bit of you, but that was the essence of the question.
Right. That's what I asked.
I am a ballet enthusiast. I have always loved ballet, dance, ballet, but I never did it as a kid because when I was about 7, I tried to dance, and this Russian ballet teacher told me that I was too short and I was too thick and I would never do it. And it like literally crushed my spirit. And I never tried to dance again formally until I got to college. So when my oldest daughter started to dance, I was like, yes, I have my dancer. And she did it for 2 years and was like, nah, I'm good. And so then I had to wait another like 10 years for my next daughter to come along and do it. That's my long way of saying that there's not really any of me in the book as much as it is my love of that particular type of dance, but also knowing how white it still is and how that whiteness can sometimes really mess with young Black dancers.
Yeah, and well, I feel like young Black kids in general, it's interesting. That story is about dance, but I have a story about a teacher who told me I would never be a writer. And why would you say that? Like there are many Black writers in the world. So it wasn't even like there was no reason outside of where I lived, where I came from, and what she thought of that neighborhood. And then nothing good would come out of that neighborhood. So I should dream smaller. And it's so interesting. I mean, I was really young when she said this. So I also think, one, it's fascinating that you would squash a kid's dream. Like this is, we're 7, we're 10 years old. Just let us dream big and wild, even if the likelihood of that might not happen. But more importantly, it's also about who gets to determine, what a person is going to be, and why is it okay for an adult, especially a teacher and someone who's trusted, to discourage a young person, and nobody checks that adult. Like I'm a kid. I didn't know to say, hey, that's not okay. Don't say that to me. I just internalized it for a really long time and thought that maybe I wasn't going to be smart enough or good enough to actually do what I wanted to do. So I think a lot of us have those stories of not even, we talk about bullying a lot with peers, but I think a lot of bullying comes from the adults in our lives that are constantly making us feel othered or less than.
It really does. And it's like now at least you can say to that teacher, yeah, take that. Because you're a prolific writer, you're successful, and you could say, take that. But again, imagine you don't have to. The trauma that you go through when an adult says to you, yeah, you're not cut out for this, it's long lasting. And I'm so glad that it didn't last for you and that you didn't approach it. I don't think I would have ever become a ballet dancer, by the way. I'm very short and, you have to be a certain height. So it's not like I ever was going to have this career. But, again, to not want a kid to pursue just the passion of art itself. I don't get that.
Yeah. So in your book, I like intergenerational stories where young people are learning from the adults in their lives too, and then also plenty of time to figure it out on their own. Can you talk a little bit about how you balance that and where the adult hand comes in to guide and lead? And I know one of the characters has a very strict family, so I would love you to talk about just your characters a little bit so that our listeners can know what's going on if they don't already know the characters.
So I am very much, it's funny, when I started doing YA, YA was, I think, going through a really great explosion. There were a lot of popular fiction books out at the time. But it was always funny to me because most of my white peers, most of their books were about the teens in their world by themselves. Yes. And as a Black girl, that's just not my experience, and it's not
Mm-mm.
my daughter's experiences. You are going to have parents involved. You are going to have them influencing your decision, or you're going to be hiding something from them. So for me, the writing intergenerational stories is just, what I know. And for these characters in particular, for Rasheeda, I I I wanted people to see what it was like for her to be raised by her aunt, and to, I gave a very tiny bit, not a lot, but I gave a little bit about why she's there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you see toward the end why her aunt was super duper strict. But until you figure out why her aunt is super duper strict, I just wanted to showcase what it was like to grow up, with her being in church every day. I mean, like, she's never not in church except
Mm-hmm.
for, during the school year, because she's a part of the talented and gifted program. And for her, she's like, okay, I'm not looking forward to summer because now I don't have any excuse and I'm going to be in church almost
All the
24/7.
time.
But like, that's just real for some kids.
It was real for me, for sure. I was having all kind of memories about vacation Bible school, summer camp trips, all of it. My mother was like, first of all, you're not going to just be sitting around the house in the summertime in her
Yep.
household. So we always had to have something to do. But also, we just were a family of faith. Her dad was a minister. I had lots of ministers in the family. We went to church consistently. And I liked it. I actually really loved being at church. I loved singing in the choir and being involved. But it's funny though, now when I look back on that, I'm like, yeah, we were there a lot. Like we really were there a lot. And I think that was
And
a strategy too, to keep us out of trouble in the
oh,
summertime. So,
no
have a
doubt.
place for us to go that was safe and welcoming.
There is no doubt about that. I am the granddaughter of a minister, and so we stayed churched up.
Mm-hmm.
It was nothing to, be like you said, at a choir rehearsal one day. I never did praise dance, and that wasn't really a part of my particular upbringing. But it was NYF because we're Methodist.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, it was all of that. It was every year going to King's Dominion for the annual NYF trip. So it was the church really was the my our social hub. And
Mm-hmm.
so you
Yeah.
didn't actively dislike it, because otherwise what would you be doing?
Right. And that's where my friends were too. I mean, some of my, even now, my lifelong friends are friends that I met at church. And because the Black community in Portland is so small, I mean, a lot of us went to the same church and the same school and, lived near each other. So we really had a tight knit community where we saw each other a lot. So I have lots of
Okay.
memories from my childhood. Some of my favorite are tied to church services and cutting up in the pews and all kind of stuff like that. So it
Yes,
shows up
yes.
on the page in my books too, with kids, with characters having experiences at church as well.
In Ways to Make Sunshine, one of the parts that really made me smile was when Ryan was getting ready for Easter service. And
Mm,
it that just brought back so many memories for me about, getting your hair pressed. My oldest daughter still has nightmares about the pressing comb. Like, she still has nightmares. My youngest daughter has no idea, like, she's never had a pressing comb on her hair, but my oldest daughter does. And so it was just so funny, because getting that hair done, and of course you better not mess that hair
you
up
better
after you got
not
it
mess it
pressed.
up. Yes, so we, in my household, my mother had my hair pressed. I think we started doing it when I was in the fifth grade, maybe. I have a lot of hair, and it's
I
always
see.
been, long and thick. And she just was like, I'm tired of doing your hair, and I'm tired of, combing through it. And so up until like my whole childhood, up until fifth grade, she would do it mostly at night, braid it, and then I'd wear it that way, maybe for the week if it would stay. If my stocking cap would stay on at night, it would be
Yes.
neat enough to stay
Shout
all
out
week,
to the stocking
right?
cap.
Shout out to the old school. Like now we have these silk bonnets, but when I was a kid, it was like some old
Yes,
stockings that would be, and it would be so tight and I would have to like take it
yes.
off as soon as I woke up because you wanted the lines to disappear as you ate
Before you got
breakfast
to church.
because you didn't want to be looking like, yeah. Anyway, so fifth grade is when I started pressing my hair. And I, again, grew up in Portland where it rains a lot. So I was always a girl at this predominantly white school in middle school who would have her hood on or an umbrella, and all of my friends who were mostly white or biracial, so their hair, when it got wet, it didn't matter, but it mattered for me. So I just always felt like the odd person in the clique in middle school because I had so many rules about what I could and couldn't do now that my hair was being straightened. And it wasn't until, I lived like that all through middle school, high school. I've always pressed my hair and then just started wearing it natural and wearing it in twists when I got older. But it never was, I didn't realize it was, we were talking about this a little bit before we came on. It wasn't a political thing for me. I never thought, I need to wear my hair straight to be beautiful. It was practical and just kind of what my family did. And I remember moving to New York and I can't remember. I met someone and they said, your hair isn't natural. I was like, I don't have any chemicals in my hair. I press it. So it's not, I've never had a perm. I've never had chemicals in it. Isn't that natural? And she was like, no, your hair didn't come out. She has an attitude. We're grown. We are adults. And she's like going off on me about my hair. And I was like, I just, okay. I didn't know that this was a big deal. And then it was so interesting. So I felt so insecure, more so as an adult than I did as a child about how I was wearing my hair. And even now, for me personally, it's more of a practical thing. It's hot and humid in New York. I travel a lot. Wearing my hair in twists is practical. And so it is just such an interesting thing when we get into this conversation about policing Black women's bodies and what we teach girls about the choices we make about if you want to do your hair this way or wear makeup or what you wear. There's just so many rules, I think, for women in general. But I definitely know as a Black woman, there's just so many people having comments about how you look and how you dress. And I like that your book, it touches on that. Even just in the type of what's available for dancers, the skin tone or not, and just, thinking about who's in mind when things are being made, or having to wear your hair in a nice little bun. She's thinking about how to wear her hair at camp. And I was like, I totally relate to this. That it just reminded me of those moments when you're trying to be yourself, but then you kind of have to conform because wherever you're going, they're not going to be prepared for your look and for how you really are. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, it makes total sense. And first of all, I'm impressed that you never were on the creamy crack, because I definitely got my first perm when I was 9 years old.
My mom wouldn't let us.
And it was controversial. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it was like, how old should they be when you perm their hair? I was 9 years old. So I had a perm all the way until I think I stopped perming my hair 15 or 20 years ago. Probably 15. Look, my earring literally just fell off. I was probably about 15 years ago. And now it's down. It's down my, okay, never mind, it's gone. And so I always have to reference my kids because, like, again, we're talking about Black girlhood, and my daughters have had like two different experiences. My oldest daughter went through the perm period, and then she stopped perming her hair. I think when she was in college. My youngest daughter has never had a perm. And so it's been interesting to watch the change in that, but absolutely the policing of our hair. My mom was of the mind of, no, don't wear braids to work. You won't look professional. They won't take you seriously. Yes. So for years, I wouldn't do that. But then I would say about 12 years ago, I'm like, nope. If they can't see my professionalism, in what I'm doing, then too bad. So I started wearing braids. Now I've been locking my hair for about a year. So when it comes to the characters, we see Mo go through, like you said, she starts to ask herself, well, I wish I had braided my hair, because now I know it's going to look a mess because it's going to get frizzy and fuzzy and whatnot. But at the same time, Mila has braids. And when you have to put those braids in a bun every day, that stuff is heavy, and it's and it takes time to get it into a
Mhm.
bun, because my daughter did it. She still wears braids, but she knows how to do them herself now, and so she knows how to, like, how many she needs to make the bun manageable. But when
Mm.
it comes to performances, it's like, maybe I should take the braids out because I need to assimilate with everybody else. So she's
Mhm.
still in that mode. But I've had talks with her teachers before where I'm like, you know what? It's just easier for her to wear her hair in braids. As long as you can get the little crown or headpiece on, what difference should it make?
Right.
So it depends. Sometimes the teachers are okay with it, but they're not always.
Yeah, I remember being in high school, and I was in this. It's called the Financial Services Academy, and they were teaching you all these business, skills so that you could get a job in the summertime, working downtown in a some fancy office. And I loved being in that program. And right before we were going to have our interviews, which kind of were, they weren't mock interviews, but it were more like placement interviews, because you were guaranteed, if you finished the program, you were going to get an internship. So right before we were going to have those, we had two Black people come into our class and talk to us. Like, literally, you could tell that our teacher, who was white, like, invited these women to come in and talk to the Black kids, because I think she knew she better not say it. So these Black women were telling us about, this is what professional hair is, and the length of your nails
Wow.
and makeup. I mean, it was all these things about how you look and how to be presentable and how to be, good little Black girls that could fit in this downtown
Yes.
business environment. And again, I'm a child. You know how sometimes you don't have the words for something, but you feel like this is messed up. Like, what is happening right now? And I remember being uncomfortable and being angry, but also feeling like powerless and kind of like, well, they're right. Like, I didn't agree, but then I felt, well, if they're telling us this and they're the professional people coming to talk to us, they must know what they're talking about. And
Exactly.
so, it's just interesting the way we as a society just uh, uh, um, allow white norms to be our norms, and then perpetuate that and keep passing it down and passing it down. And so I think about that a lot, where sometimes I address it flat on in my books and, talk about hair or whatever. But other times I just want characters to exist just so the visual can be there. And we don't even need to address it. But just, I think the more and more you see diverse body size, diverse textures of hair, just all ways of being, that's one way to kind
Yes.
of push back against this notion that there is one right way to present yourself as worthy or professional or good or beautiful, any of those words that we use when we're having those kind of conversations with girls. Thank God for my
Oh,
mother
I
and for the
agree.
like Black women in my church who were able to counter some of what I was learning outside of my community. I'm very grateful that I have both voices constantly in my head, and so it helped me have more of a self-esteem and a kind of a choice in the matter, because at home I was hearing I was beautiful just as is,
Hmm.
and looking at all these variety of Black women in my church, but outside of my community, I was constantly being told, no, actually, you're not. Who told you were? They, of course, they didn't say,
Right.
no, you're not. But when you're telling somebody, in order to get this job, you need to change everything about the way you look, you are saying that I'm not enough and that I'm not good enough.
You are. And
Yeah.
and I definitely have had the conversation with my daughter that's a ballet dancer. I tell her, I said, your very existence in the ballet world is your advocacy sometimes. Sometimes you don't have to protest. You just being there for some people is tipping the apple cart. And
Yeah.
certainly, the two, not last year, but the year before last, she was the Snow Queen in the Nutcracker. And I went to what happened? Something happened, and she had to wear her hair braided. I cannot remember what happened, but I went to the creative director and I said, "Look, her hair, something happened, it's too short. She's going to have to wear the braids because it's just not going to work. And she said, okay. And Renee, it was the most beautiful thing. And every time she came on stage in that all white tutu with these braids pulled back and her tiara on, like I would
Yes,
bawl just
I
because
love
just
it.
seeing her on stage like that was just enough. And I just thought, in people, the way older people would react to her, and I would say to her, the black adults are having such a moment seeing you on stage like that. And I said, so I know it's got to matter to the much younger ones.
Yeah.
So just
Oh,
something
that's
that simple
beautiful.
is
I
so
love that.
important.
Yeah, it can be simple. It doesn't have to be this outward, big, obvious kind of statement or protest. But I think, just our existence and us putting these characters in books and their existence on the page is a way, I think, of um, of protesting and saying like
Yeah,
these people, these bodies, this skin tone, this hair texture, all of that matters too, and it's just as valid and important.
absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that one of the things that I wanted to do with Turning Point also, like I didn't actively set out to to tell a story. I guess I didn't actively set out to tell a story about race so much,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things that I did want to make sure I covered was how Mo interacts with her white roommates and the cultural differences
Oh,
that
yes.
come from living together.
Yes.
And so when they, the way that, when they first get there and how the mother of one of the white roommates just comes into the room and she's asking all these questions. And,
Yes.
like for a black kid, you're like, okay, you are being nosy. The white mom is just sort of like curious and wants to know who her daughter is going to be living next to for the next 3 weeks or whatever. But to
Yeah.
a black kid, you've already been told, don't go out here spreading my business and, running your
Ooh,
mouth and talking about. So I wanted to show like that, those differences and how, we view something that, again, the mother would have seen nothing wrong with asking the questions that she did, or even just
right.
poking her head in the room, which Mo was like, who is stepping up on us like this?
Right. I thought that was so funny and just so real. And I did appreciate that. I mean, it's interesting. I think, yes, there's this idea of I'm writing a book about race or about racism or, but then there's also like, well, it's a black character. That's the main character. So if they are living in America, in the United States of America, chances are at some point they're going to have to combat that. And it doesn't have to necessarily be the biggest theme of the book, but it's going to come up because it comes up in our lives. And I don't know that people understand that who are not people of color, that every single day in very small ways, it comes up that I am black. I am reminded that I am black. I am reminded that I am a woman and that this world was not made for me, right? And so I love
Yeah,
that those cultural differences just pop up in the book. And it's not like, the biggest deal or the biggest plot point, but that we definitely see what it is like to just be every day, just like, this is what it is. I'm a black girl going to this camp with these dancers and my roommate, like all of that was so spot on. And that it happens at an early age too. I think that's when
yeah,
you start spending the night with friends or going to someone else's church and things like that as a child, that's
yep,
when you start realizing like, oh, everybody don't have the same rules that we have, and
yes,
everyone doesn't
yes.
do things like we do. And some of it you like, and some of it you're like, what's wrong with them that they don't do it like you do it? So I love that was in there, and I think that a lot of young people will identify with that too, even if it's not the white family, black family, but just the idea of meeting new people for the first time and realizing how different you are. Like there's some commonalities. We love dance, but then there's also all these other things that are like, whoa, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, slow down. I need you to back up a
It
little bit.
And for sure, Mo's journey, she has a comfort. She has a comforter there with her. She has Mila,
Yeah.
and so she has a piece of home with her. But we see that they're not exactly the same either. So, like you said, it's not always black white. It's definitely a lot of cultural things, but it's also I guess the way we see ourselves and the things that we're interested in. Mila is assimilating easier than Mo is in this
Mm-hmm.
time. And Mila wants her to ease up a little bit. And Mo is basically like, I don't know how to ease up. Like, this is who I am. And that's one of the reasons why we ask the question, who are you when being you isn't enough?
Yeah.
And it's a question that both characters really experience that entire summer. It's just that kind of crisis of identity. Like, but Mo is like, but I'm okay with who I am. So is that wrong?
Right. Yeah. And can we talk? I really want to make sure, and I know I'm assuming we have questions too, so I want to make sure we have time for that. But I wanted to bring up
Sure.
in what you just said about questioning your own identity, am I enough? Also brings up this idea of comparing yourself to other people, right? And so there's this
Yeah.
whole thing. I don't want to give away everything, but there's a lot of like, am I good enough? Is she better than me? If your friend gets the scholarship or gets the opportunity and you don't, or vice versa, like how does that change friendship? So I'd love to talk about, first of all, like the craft of it. Like how did you decide I'm going to have this theme in the book? And then also I'm just curious about you and your childhood, and did you have any of that kind of either sisterhood or friendship rivalry or comparison, and how you dealt with that? Because I think women especially are always comparing ourselves to each other, or outsiders are comparing close friends.
From a craft perspective, I I have really found my sweet spot with this dual perspective.
Yes,
I
you
am
have.
loving it. So, spoiler alert, everybody, I'm going to be writing like this for a minute. 'Cause
Nice. Please do.
I,
You do it really well. They're
but
very different
thank
characters.
you. I appreciate that. I just like being able to cover more than one story. That might
Mm,
have a lot to do with, you know, I stay doing too much. So maybe that could explain that. But I like being able to explore um more than one character, but I also like to explore the intersections, where when their lives, keep either conflicting or when they merge fluidly.
mhm.
So I really like doing that with my stories. So I think I'm going to stay in this zone for a little bit and just in that particular story style. Um, but when it comes to, you asked the question about, my own childhood and how that's connected. I am an only child. So for me, being able to explore relationships like Mo having, she's one girl in a family of boys, mostly boys who are in trouble, and all but one of them are incarcerated. So I want, to kind of showcase uh, that. I want to showcase that lifestyle for a couple of reasons. To break some myths, because I think a lot of people would like to believe that, if you look at Mo's situation on its face and you look at the fact that she has these brothers who have gotten in trouble so much so that now they no longer are at home, they're now in jail, you think to yourself something about her mother. You feel some kind of way about, well, what kind of parent are you?
Mhm.
But we see what kind of parent she is. She's a nurse. She works the late shift. She's a single mom working to keep a roof, above her kid's head. And so I wanted to make sure that I showcased different backgrounds so that people would stop thinking that just because someone lives in a working class neighborhood or a low income community, that there's this typical story behind it,
Mhm.
of the mom who's getting public assistance. And there's nothing wrong with that, except for that's always the assumption. It's immediately the assumption that that's where all these kids are coming from. And none of my characters come from that situation. They all come from working families.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that, I kind of experienced on the periphery. Like I was completely middle class and suburban, but my grandmother lived in a working class neighborhood, and I'd always see the differences, in myself and the kids in that neighborhood. And when a lot of them began to transfer from their high school into the high school I went to, I would see the differences. So there was always this back and forth, this friction between the working class kids and how they were brought up and the middle class kids. And that's why I explore that a lot in my books, because that was definitely something that, I got to experience firsthand in terms of the friction between us.
Did you experience jealousy and competition with your friends as a child? Like there's a little bit of that in this story, because one of them one of them is a really good dancer, and there's a lot of comparison about, and also judgment on, well, what is good dance, right? And so like all of that kind of stuff, where did that come from for you writing the book? And then do you have any of your own personal reflections?
The competition didn't really come from my own experiences, because my best friend and I, when I was in middle school and high school, both of us did the same exact things. We were both cheerleaders. We both liked to write. We would actually like write stories in class and then swap them in the hallway. And I would read her story, she would read mine, and we'd build on them, and we would just do that like all day.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
It wasn't competitive. It was so much fun. And so there wasn't any competition between us. Where you see the competition come in this story in particular, or not so much competition, but what you see is Sheeda has a longing to be a part of that world, because for so long not for so long, because they've only been dancing for 2 years, but for 2 years they were all dancing as part of this program at their rec center. And so what we see with her is kind of that longing for, I wish we were all still together again, because now her friends are starting to grow in their own art. And she still feels, she dances well, like she says, for church. But she still praise dances, right? But it's just not, it's not refined enough for her to do it elsewhere. And that really just came from thinking about just being left behind, period. So that wasn't a personal experience, but it was knowing, like, what would it feel like if all of us started out at the exact same time dancing, and then all of a sudden 2 of you have completely, left me behind. And so it was a longing, and I wanted to build on where when she has that gap in friendship, what that would lead to. And we see what it leads to, because she obviously strikes up a friendship.
Yes, she does. I like that you are saying longing, because I do think sometimes we misname things when we see our young people trying to express what they're feeling, and maybe we call it jealousy, and maybe we call it competition, or you're being petty, or whatever, right? We tend to call it negative things, but a lot of time it is just the longing and missing how things used to be. Change is really hard. And when you're a young person, I think we all know, even as adults, how hard change is, right? But when you're young and you feel already out of control, you can't make that many decisions about your life anyway. So the consistent things in your friendships and your routines of how summer usually goes, and then here's summer, and wait a minute, what? We're not doing what we normally do. You're leaving, you're going, I really felt that, and I appreciated that. Yeah, there is that longing of just like, hey, I'm all for you doing your thing. That's great. But please don't forget about me. Like, please, like, I hope that we're still going to be good. And I think that's something that I've felt personally. And I like having that in my characters too. Like that moment when it's all been the same, and then boom, something happens, even if it's a good thing, like getting to go to this retreat and this, this dance camp, even if it's a good opportunity, that it can still bring about some sadness So yeah, I really liked that.
And, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think we should probably take questions because I want to make
Okay,
sure we
yes,
can
yes.
cover as many as possible. Can our lovely hosts come back?
Everybody, when you see me look in a different direction, it's because I have the laptop open. I can see the chat. I just can't respond to the chat, everybody.
Do you mind
we
feeding some of the questions to us?
Yeah, I could do that.
Thank you.
All right. The top one is, what is one thing you would like everybody who reads your books to know?
Wow.
What is one thing? That shouldn't be a hard question, should it? Okay. I would like people to know that Renee said something really important, and it was when she said sometimes we misname things, calling something petty or jealousy when it is just a longing for the way things were. I want kids to be able to understand that it's okay to feel that. And that it's a way to channel that energy. We see Rasheeda do it. So I want the young readers to know it's okay, but I want the adult readers to remember to empathize, because we sort of want kids to get over stuff like you'll be fine, but sometimes they need to feel it. You need to let them feel that longing, that loneliness, because that's going to help them develop too, right? So so just have a little empathy.
How about you, Renee?
Oh yeah, I don't know that there's one thing. I guess I'll build off of what Paula is saying. I think when I think about ways to make sunshine, I can start with that. I want young people especially to know that it is okay to make mistakes, right? We have these lofty goals of Ryan's name means king. So she's always being told to be a leader, be who we named you to be. And she wants to live up to that, but that's a lot of pressure. She's in the 4th grade. And sometimes she rises to the occasion and she can be the leader and make the good choice or step out of her comfort zone. And sometimes she's really scared, or she's fearful that she's going to lose a friend, scared to try new things, doesn't want to move, and that's okay too. It's okay to feel what you're feeling, and it's okay to make a mistake. You can always apologize if you've done something that isn't so great, and there's always tomorrow to be better. And I think sometimes we put expectations on our young people, and I think that's why they don't tell us stuff. It's because they don't want to disappoint us, because they're making mistakes, as they should at 10 and 12 and 14. Yep. Like, they should be making lots of mistakes. And hopefully the adults are there to, pick them up and love them and encourage them. So yeah, I hope that my readers feel seen and validated in that they are human and that it's okay to make mistakes, just get back up.
Love it. A sense of longing, and you can make mistakes. I love that. All right. This question always gets asked: what advice would you give to aspiring young writers? But I want you to put a twist on it. If you were writing, if you were just starting, what would you do differently? What would be something that you can take this knowledge you have from all of these things you've written? What would you do differently if you were starting younger?
I'll go first. If I was starting younger, I would read more. I didn't read enough I read a lot of poetry as a child. But I would say, like, high school, for many reasons that I won't get into, but in high school, I didn't read as many novels as I probably should have and would have liked to. Part of it is because I didn't like what was being given to me and what was required. And so that's one thing. But yeah, I think, to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader and a good listener. So I always tell aspiring writers to listen, to talk less and listen more. Listen to how people talk, what they're talking about, eavesdrop on the subway or the bus, or when you're in the line at a store. Like, I pick up what people are talking about all the time, and that impacts the stories I write. And just listening to the world and what's happening also bring that to my writing, even when I don't realize that I am. So my advice is to listen and to read.
Okay. Listen and read. Paula, anything to add?
My Yeah, my advice would be to show yourself some grace. I know how hard writers are on themselves because I tend to be hard on myself, but that it's almost like there's this need that what you write has to be perfect.
Mhm.
And what I've definitely come to embrace over the years is that that first draft is completely messy. It's just you trying to figure the story out. And I don't think we ever give ourselves enough breaks with that. We just want it to be right the first time.
Yes.
And so it's like enjoy that first draft. It's you're telling yourself that story. So enjoy that. You don't know what's happening. I mean, even for the people who plot, right? You're not sure how it might change a little bit. So enjoy the first draft. Show yourself some grace.
It's funny in my first draft and sometimes second, I'll be writing and I'll be, paragraph, 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 and then in parentheses, something needs to happen here. And then I'll move on. And then I'll write and write and write. And I'll be like, highlight something and like come back and fix this part. And then just keep going. I think sometimes new writers get so stuck, like to what Paula is saying, on having it perfect that you never finish the draft because you keep rewriting the first chapter. And it's like, well, sweetheart,
Yeah.
it's not going to be a book if it only has one chapter. I mean, unless you're doing something revolutionary and innovative. But if you are wanting to write a traditional novel, you got to write it. You got to finish. And so, yeah, I know that I can go back and fix it and add on. For me, it's nice to just get the whole story out. And then I can be like, okay, this is what I'm working with. And now let me go back and be a writer and really add and think and, plot out and make it shine a little bit. But my first drafts are sloppy and messy. And I never think I'm going to finish. And I always self-doubt that this story is not worth telling. Why did I say I would write this? Like you go through all of that. And I think that's a part of the process. So don't shy away from that part of it. Because I don't know any writer who doesn't fear that what they're working on isn't good enough.
That leads me to this kind of the next question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you used the word fear.
Colin, did you already go?
No,
Colin,
I just said I'm glad you used the word fear.
Yes, it's there all the time.
You talked about a little bit about this. Do you write for yourself or do you have an audience in mind when you're writing? Do you just have something inside you that you just have to get out? How does that work?
I 100% write for myself. I really do. I mean, I write for the young reader in myself. I realize now just how few books were out there like I write in particular. And when I was a young reader, so I'm writing for me. I would have loved to read my books when I was younger, just to see Black people doing something else, just to see something that was a little bit more contemporary. So I do write for me.
I think both. Like in theory and in like the more philosophical way, yes, I'm writing for my younger self. I'm writing for Black girls, especially in the Pacific Northwest, because I don't think our stories are on the page or the screen enough. Yeah, I'm writing for all of that. But in the moment when I am actually working on a story, I am trying to write a good story, right? And so if I bring all of the pressure of I'm writing for Black girls, I want them to feel seen, I want to honor Portland, I want to, that's too much to think about as I'm trying to write. But so my motivation for writing is to make sure that Black girlhood is on the page, Black joy, that I'm not just writing about our struggles and challenges and pain, but that, I'm thinking of all of that more when I'm not writing. But when I actually sit down to write, it is really about the story and just trying to make a good, compelling story.
Love it. I love it. How do you know where to start though? Like you sit down and how do you know where you need to start the story, whatever story you're writing?
You don't. You don't know where to start. I usually my beginnings change through revision. Like by the time I get to the end of a story, then I know where it should start a lot of times. And I'll go back and change the first line or the first paragraph sometimes. Not all the time, but for me, a lot of times I'm working the story out as I go. And so I don't necessarily start a first draft knowing exactly where to start. But one rule that I think I kind of lean into is start where the change is happening or is about to happen. Like, I like to start with the stakes already high and not a lot of building up to the moment, but just like something has just happened or something is about to happen, and just drop the reader into that moment. What about you, Paula?
And it's funny because I always say to people that I am like the Seinfeld of children's literature. My books are about nothing. Like, and of course that's like taboo. You're not supposed to say that. But like for
Well, and
real,
it's not true. What are you talking about? We just talked about your books being about something for 50 minutes.
but like when I'm sitting down to write them, it's never that it's never that streamline and that cut and dry. And so
Yeah.
one of the challenges that I actually have is that I'm a slow burn author. None of my books start off pure. They're all very slow, and so I'm always worried to try to sell a book just on a sample, because I know that I take time. My books never start off fast, and even when I go back to do the draft, it's still a slow burn because that's just how I tell a story. And
Mhm.
I used to beat myself up about it because everybody's like, no, you got to capture them right away. And I'm like, I'm just not that kind of writer. Like, I want you to get to know my characters. So it's just, it's just how I write.
Yeah, I think, what's most important to me is the character, not the plot. So I spend a lot of time thinking about what is my character going to say and how are they going to communicate to the reader. And I don't know that I start off with an inciting, like an incident that's so intense, but more so just important to that character. So like if you think about
Yep.
Ryan, nothing huge is happening either in her life, but to her, in her fourth grade mind, getting the news that moving, that is like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, that's the worst thing ever to happen. Or having
Yes.
this boy in her class wanting to race her and he's always teasing her about her name, so it's not so much what's considered like the big plot points and adrenaline rushing page turner, but more I have to know, what does my character care about? When I'm teaching writing, I always say, this is how I write. And what does my character care about? What do they want? And what's in their way
Hmm.
of getting what they want? And my job as a
Yep.
writer is to make that very clear in the first chapter that my character wants this. And for the rest of the story, I am being the very mean author that's making it really hard for that character to get that thing. I tease them. You think they're going to get, nope, no, they're not. You think, nope, no, they're not. And that goes on to the end of the book. And either they find out that what
Yep.
they thought they wanted, they actually don't want or need, or they get the thing. That's kind of my thought process in writing, but that looks all different ways depending on the character.
You know what's
All
funny
right.
is somebody that told me that, I mean, most people say that, oh, your books are about drama, because it's usually about kind of friendship conflict or whatever. And so one day I was talking to Danielle Clayton, and she was like, because you write those quiet books. And I'm like, quiet books? And she was like, yeah, because she said your books are all about the character's emotion. And she
Mm-hmm.
said, so she goes, it may seem like drama. She was like, but she goes, you write quiet books about emotion. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Because it's all about that internal conflict that they're going through as they grow.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up with one last question. We've had this global pandemic, and publishing during this time has had to been so frustrating because there's only so much you can do to promote your books or get them out there. So, not your books, but what is a book this year that's come out that you think we should not miss? It could be young adult, could be middle grade. What's some books that we have to make sure that we go back and get if we haven't gotten them, or that's coming up later that we should keep our eyes open for?
I can name some authors who sometimes I forget people's titles, but I know that Brandy Colbert has had books come out. Liara Tamani has as well, and I highly recommend them. Brandy's first middle grade came out. The Only Black Girls in Town, that's the name. And so,
Yes,
yeah, I
that's
highly
great.
recommend that. and Liara is escaping me, but it's a YA and it's a love story. So I highly recommend that too.
It's on my website. I know it's for the brown bookshelf.
Yeah, it's and I love the book. I'm sorry that I'm blanking. I always do that when I'm asked these kinds of questions.
And you know what? I normally write a list of like, these are the books I'm going to shout out today. I did not do that. And so I am going to totally cheat and just tell people to, to head to the brown bookshelf, because we decided to keep doing, we were doing a generations book club where we were highlighting a book for the entire family. And it started out as just a summer venture, but now we're going to keep doing it. So I'm just going to tell people to head on over to the brown bookshelf, because the September generations will be up, I believe, tomorrow.
Nice. All right. Well, that's awesome. All right, ladies, any last things before we shut it down and go get some dinner or sleep or whatever we need to do after this?
I just want to, congratulate you again, Paula, on your book, and encourage everybody to get it. It is really, really good. I'm so proud of you, happy for you, excited to have another book by you in the world. So congratulations. Happy book birthday.
Congratulations. Yes. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you. Right. This has been so much fun. Thank you for having me, Renee. Thanks for conversing with me. I did read Ways to Make Sunshine, and I loved it. So I know people can't wait for that to come out.
All right. Thank you both. Have a wonderful evening. I really appreciate you guys giving us this time tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Kathy. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Have a great evening.